Marty, great to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, John. It's glad to see your happy, smiling face as usual.
Right back at you, brother. Hey, thanks for joining us today. We've really been enjoying these, with our audience, getting to know our facilitators better. And I thought maybe one way we could just kick off today is tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you wound up at Force Management.
Yeah, good question. That's a good place to start. The very beginning, right? So I spent 25 years, I was the pre-sales demo guy for a while, and then I moved into selling, and then like many sellers, one day they say, hey, you're really good at this. Why don't you become a manager? I'm like, well, what do you got to do for that? They didn't really give me a very good answer. So I got into that. It was a small little startup company. And, we were all making it up, to be honest. And, we got good at it. We had a great product, we had a great solution, and you just keep doing well and you keep getting bigger and better titles and getting bought by company after company. And one day the last company that buys you just doesn't do a very good job. And so that kind of tanked and they got rid of a bunch of us. And I was kind of like, well, now what do I do the rest of my life, right? And so we had worked with a sales training company out of Atlanta. So I called them up and I said, hey, do you guys ever use, trainers? And they said, well, we're thinking about it. And so I knew them and they knew me. And so I started working for them for several years. And then that company kind of faded out. And I got a call from somebody at Force Management who said, hey, your name was referred to us. They said that you were one of the best trainers that they knew. So we're calling you to see if you want to come work with us. And I said, okay, where is it? Charlotte. So I drove to Charlotte and lo and behold, I met John Kaplan, and the rest, as they say, is history. So I think it's been about 5 years.
God, I was just thinking about that. I was trying to remember. Has it been 5 years already? Wow.
I think so. What I remember is, I had to do a 2-day audition for you, just you and me, if you remember that hotel room.
Yeah.
And I thought I was a hot shot, and everything was going great until the end of the first day, and we got to this one segment. And I just kind of misunderstood what I was supposed to be doing as a trainer in that segment. And I got done with it. You looked at me, you go, dude, man, you were killing it all day, but that was terrible.
Mr. Subtle, huh? Wow.
But here's the cool part about it. So there were a couple stories that I had never told before, just different content from what I had been doing before. So you and I workshopped those two stories. And then you said, you better go back to your hotel room. You better get those stories down because you got to come in tomorrow morning and kill it. And so you were very kind to workshop that out with me, and turned out two great stories that I've used a lot, and there were new stories I never had. So yeah, you were very helpful there, very kind. But what was important for me was when you said, boy, that was terrible. Because I needed to hear that, right?
I was just it's funny that you say that. I might have mentioned this. I don't think I mentioned this on the last podcast we did, but I'm really all about this this Last Chance U series that they do on Netflix. And the latest one, Last Chance U Basketball, I think is it's the best one for me. It's so Last Chance U is like stories about these junior college. It's kind of like the last chance for a lot of these kids. And the last 2 or 3 years have been about football. And the football coaches, from a leadership perspective, I don't want to say anything disparaging, but like really, really rough. And I really, really loved this Coach Mosley at East Los Angeles Community College. It's a great story if you haven't seen it. But the reason why I'm saying that is something stuck out to me for what he said, is that somebody told him he was wondering why he wasn't starting, and he went to his coach and he's just like had all these lists of why he should be starting, and the coach just looked at him and said, I'm sorry, John, you're just not good enough to start here. And I'm not saying that because that's not what I said to you, but I thought that what a wonderful, and he said nobody had ever said that to him, said it to him in that way, where there was no malice, it was just like, hey. And it really got him contemplating on, talking to people and giving them straight feedback is really, really a blessing. And I remember back in my life when people have done that to me and just told it like it was, without any malice, without any. So anyways, I know you're a big sports guy down there, with Georgia Tech, and I think you'd really, really enjoy that.
All right, cool.
Okay, so to follow up on that last conversation we just had, why don't you dig a little bit deeper for us and tell us specifically, how did you get into sales?
Well, I wasn't going to go into sales for a couple of reasons. One, I had a horrible image of sellers coming from my father. My father was a pretty successful civil engineer in the steel fabrication business, small little company. There was a CEO. In the software world, my dad would have been the head of product. And then there was a third guy who was the seller. And I remember at the dinner table hearing these kind of disparaging comments about Delwood.
He was just crushing them.
Who was the seller? And of course, this is my dad, and I love him, and he's a civil engineer and all that kind of stuff. And so I had a bad self-image of that. And I was going to go to medical school. My mom's a nurse, and I was a biology undergrad, and everything was on track. And I'm taking the MCATs, and I'm doing all that kind of working in a hospital. But my junior year, I started to begin to realize, you know what? I don't want to go to medical school. So I ended up getting a graduate degree in industrial engineering, and I stayed in the healthcare business. And I wanted to become the gray-haired consultant in the corner office with the full floor to wall, ceiling to floor windows. And I was going to be taking a piece of every deal, and they would all come to me with these hard questions, and I would give them the answers. That was my vision of I was going to be the wizened old consultant, right? And except I wasn't old yet. And so the PC came out. They thought they should be getting into computers. We ended up doing a deal with a small software company, and I was the demo guy. So I just ran around doing demos all the time. And about 3 years later, I get a box at my home, and I open up the box, and inside is the original Motorola brick phone, what I call the Gordon Gecko phone, the one he used in Wall Street on the beach with the rubber antenna.
Yeah.
So I called the company. It was from the company that we were a distributor for them. And I said, Michael, why did you send me this phone? This is the coolest thing. Of course, everybody wanted one. And he was surprised, and he said, Marty, we send that phone to everybody who sells $1 million in software. I thought I was a consultant. That was the revelation that, dude, you're not a consultant, you're a seller. And that was $1 million at 20 grand a pop. That was about 40 deals in 3 years. And that's when I said, okay, goodbye consulting.
Now, wait, you got to clarify this one,
software.
dude. Were they paying you as a seller or?
No,
Okay.
No, I was on the consulting side, and I was just getting my salary. And there was no commission, but I mean, that was, it had a happy ending, right? But I'm not kidding you. I was a consultant who just happened to be doing demos and selling software and implementing it. And when I got that phone, he said, we send to everybody who sells $1 million. I'm like, I'm at the wrong company. I'm at the wrong job. I'm a different person than I thought I would. That's how I got into sales.
That is awesome. I got to tell you, that's not uncommon. I've talked to other people about how they got into sales. And sometimes it's a simple revelation of comp. Like they were either on the, on one end of one part of the process, which the only thing that they didn't have officially, I guess, is the quota, but they didn't really know it. They were out there doing consulting or application engineers or what have you. And some of the best sellers I've ever met are people that have kind of got that realization. They were natural sellers. They weren't really in it for the compensation because they didn't know. But the minute they found out that that's what they should be making is when they jumped into sales. I love that. That's an awesome story. Yeah. Hey, along those lines, tell me, I've got a list of questions for you here.
Yeah.
Tell me the worst mistake you ever made in a sales job.
Well, I think it's the beginning when I thought the way you're going to be great at selling was to just tell them everything there was about that product. I mean, I knew every module, every screen. I could go into the config files. I did go into the config files, right? So I was completely convinced that because we had, quote, the best product on the market, and I knew everything there was about it, and I'm charming and I'm energetic and I can answer any question there was, and that was all true, that all, because I knew it was great for them, they would automatically get it. And then they would buy. And I remember for the first beginning 10 or 12 months, I didn't sell a thing, and I finally hooked a deal, talking to the CIO, why did it take so long? And he told me, basically, I asked the people in nursing 3 or 4 or 5 questions about the business impact on the hospital. And they said, Marty never talked about it. And we were working on the contract. And he said, and that's why you just gave me the discount you just gave me. And again, that's another one of those revelations of, wait a minute, you were interested in the business impact, not about the cool function. And so that was another wake-up call of, okay, I gotta learn something more than what I know now. And it isn't the product, right? I'm already good at that. So I gotta
And
thank that
maybe
CIO, you know.
one of the carryovers from being so technically versed on the product, which is a huge advantage for you to make a leap into sales,
Yeah.
but then realizing that you kind of have to hold on to that, and when it's appropriate and you earn the right to share that
Yes.
information about the product. So that's really interesting. So for those that are listening, about the conversation that we just had about the technical folks getting into sales, is that it's really all about timing and kind of earning the right to share that knowledge.
But it could become a burden. It was a burden for me. I had to unburden myself of that technical knowledge.
Yeah,
You got to
wow,
learn
that
to not do that.
I love that. That's really interesting. So I know I'm going to get a good one on from you on this one. What's the funniest thing that happened on a sales call?
So I was thinking about that, and you know, we probably all had lots of funny stuff. But the first seller I ever hired as a manager, Lori Martin, still one of my best friends. In fact, she just invited me down to her 60th birthday party in August. I mean, we're still pretty tight, right? So she was the seller, and I was the manager. And in many cases, I would go with them because there were big crowds of people, and we had to, you know, she was going to do the demo on a PC. And we had a projector to project. This is when projectors have finally come out. And so we're getting the room set up, and she's got her computers on this table, one of those, you know, movable tables like you would see in a cafeteria. This is at a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting all set up. And the woman who's our main contact comes up and looks how we kind of got things configured. And she goes, "Oh, no, Lori." She says, "That's not where the table should go." And she grabs the side of the table that has the computer on it and goes whoosh, like that. And the computer goes, bam, and
Oh,
keys started bouncing off the keyboard.
oh no, oh no.
And Lori and I are like, and it's like, you know, demo in 15 minutes, you know, and she's looking at the floor. And so we didn't laugh then, we laughed later, but Lori was just so calm and collected. She was a former IC nurse. She'd seen a lot worse, right? You know what she did? I mean, I kind of wanted to get super angry. She just got on the floor, grabbed up the keys, started sticking them back on. That's when those keyboards were,
They
you
had
know,
little
stuck back
clips on them. They could
Yeah.
clip on there. Yeah.
And a couple of the letters wouldn't work right, but she somehow did the demo and it didn't bother her at all. But she started the presentation, you would have thought nothing had happened. Now, it wasn't funny then, but then on our ride back to the airport, we're just laughing, going, "Can you believe she didn't think to unplug the computer or hold
No,
the computer?" Yeah,
no. But calm under pressure, though, dude. Right?
all
Wow.
under pressure. Yeah. Yeah.
On the hands and knees. That's awesome. That's a good story. All right, now, uh, a salesperson or sales leader you worked with in your career, who was the best one?
Yeah, in some of our training, I talk about this guy, Bruce. Bruce was a guy that showed up in these companies that all got melded together. And when I was able to move from managing teams that were selling PC-based apps to big Unix, big mainframe, $1 million stuff, I had never been in that world. And Bruce had. And so I was, I guess, luckily smart enough to listen to Bruce. So Bruce is the seller. He works for me. I'm the VP. And I learned more from Bruce, I know, than Bruce ever learned from me. But the two things that as I was reflecting on this, one, Bruce was the seller that would come to me and say, "Hey, I filled out our blue sheet or filled out whatever it was we were using at the time. I just emailed it to you. Let's set some time up so we can walk through this deal so we can figure out what the next steps should be." I was beating everybody else over the head. "Send me your blue sheets, send me your blue sheets." Bruce was always proactively fully thought out, well thought out, you know, good conclusions, good strategies. And so we had an amazing conversation because we didn't have to figure out what the details were. We were actually talking strategy. So that he was a real rarity from that perspective. The other thing that I learned from him is to stop talking so much. And you can maybe tell by now that's, you know, a challenge for me, right? I mean, I'm a real extrovert. He's a real introvert. I would open the show, close the show. Bruce was very quiet. And so what I learned from him is I remember getting in cars many times after meetings. And I would say, "Bruce, man, we got to get back to the office and put that pricing together." And he would go, "No, we don't." I said, "But Bruce, they want us to do the pricing." He goes, "We don't got to answer that question. Just because they ask you something doesn't mean you got to answer it." And I was like, oh, yeah. He was a master at waiting and waiting and waiting. So we had full scope, full understanding, full connections to people, champions, economic buyers. and then we put the price together. And so that again, not rushing to the demo and not rushing to a proposal. Bruce was the master at that, and he taught me because I didn't have that skill. He had it.
Marty, that's a really interesting perspective about your story about Bruce, because when I think about that story, I think about a couple of things, and I often tell this to companies that, if you are the way that you're managing and utilizing resources to help reps get unstuck or to do, to coach and develop them, if you focus on compliance versus the value that it creates, there's a problem, and that's a really bad value proposition. The second thing is, what sticks out is that Bruce came to you, and I used to tell managers that work for me, if your reps aren't coming to you for help on pre-call planning, for help on strategy, that's also a real good indication that your value proposition to them is probably focused around compliance and not around what value you had. So I really like that story. I like that. Okay, last one, brother. What's the best piece of sales advice that you ever got? And that you don't hear that often.
Yeah, so I remember years ago, my boss, the head of sales, I was, I guess, a regional director at the time, Alan. He had come in kind of new. He wasn't from the old crew. He was from the outside. And so in the beginning, and that little culture was kind of clicky. Well, what's Alan going to teach us? He hasn't done any of this kind of thing. I remember him very clearly saying to me, Marty, you've got to stop doing unnatural acts. I was like, Alan, what are you talking about? And he goes, we got to stop doing all these crazy things at the end of the quarter to try to close that deal, to try to pull it in. And so when he said unnatural acts, that's all the things. Well, if you sign by now, you'll get this price. But if you don't sign by now, the price is going up. I mean, all the crazy, goofy things that we've all done, we know we shouldn't be doing them. But at our company at that point in time, we thought that's how you're supposed to do it. Well, again, it was a revelation of Alan coming in. We're thinking he doesn't know anything. He's like, we're doing way too many unnatural acts. We got to stop it. If it goes the next quarter, then it's going to go the next quarter. I give half the money away just to book it this quarter. And that led to us becoming much better at what we call diagnostic selling. It also led to us becoming much better negotiators and planning for that negotiation phase. But I'll never forget the phrase, because I was like, what are you talking about? Because I conjured up some bad images, right? Unnatural acts.
Yeah.
And then when he explained it, I'm like, geez, I guess I do one of those once a week,
It's amazing though, like it's so profound what that individual said to you, because like everything we do as seller teaches our customers. All these unnatural acts that we do typically in the last 2 weeks of the quarter. It teaches and it preconditions buyers. When we were at PTC, we had probably 80% of our revenue, and sometimes much, much more, that came in the last 2 weeks of the quarter. And that's not uncommon for enterprise software companies. And the number one reason why is because the buyers were preconditioned by the sellers. Said, if you wait till the last 2 weeks of the quarter, these guys are going to do unnatural acts, and you'll probably get a great discount. So I think that's a really, really valuable lesson. And also, I think the number one reason why we do those unnatural acts is pipeline. It's always related to pipeline. If you got a big pipeline, you're less inclined to do unnatural acts. So I love that. I love that. Great ad, brother. Hey, dude, you've been such a blessing to Force Management. I thought you're going to come in and kill it kind of for us with your healthcare background and that healthcare background and technology and software. And, you are one of the favorite facilitators out in the marketplace. And we just get nothing but raving reviews about you. So thank you for what you do for us, and just wish you just continued success.
Well, I'm going to keep hanging out with you guys as long as you'll have me. So.
You got it, brother. Have a great week, dude.
All right. You too.
See you, buddy.
See you. Bye. All right.